The Arizona sun was beginning to disappear behind the desert horizon when Jake Morgan pulled his 18-wheeler into a rest area. Outside Phoenix, he had been driving for almost 10 hours, carrying a shipment from California to a distribution center in Arizona. Jake was used to long roads, empty highways, and late-night coffee. At 41, he was also used to being a single father. His 12-year-old son Ethan lived with him full-time, and Jake had built his entire life around making sure the boy had stability. Whenever Jake wasn't driving, he was helping with homework, cooking dinner, fixing things around their small house, or listening to Ethan talk about school. That evening, Ethan was staying with Jake's sister while Jake finished the delivery. Jake checked his phone. A message from Ethan appeared. "Dad, don't forget you promised pizza." Jake smiled. Never. He put his phone away and noticed a small fitness center beside the rest area. Jake had been sitting behind the wheel for hours. His back was stiff and he needed to stretch. He decided to stop for a short workout. Inside the gym was busy. Heavy bags swung from the ceiling while several people practiced martial arts. Jake changed clothes and quietly began stretching in the corner. He wasn't looking for attention, but someone noticed him. Victor Kane. Victor was a well-known black belt who had built a reputation around being undefeated in local competitions. He was confident, muscular, and loud. After finishing a demonstration, Victor noticed Jake's stance. "You train?" Jake looked up. "Not anymore," Victor laughed. "That's not what I asked," Jake shrugged. Years ago, Victor stepped closer. "What belt?" Jake smiled. "Doesn't matter." A few people nearby laughed. "Victor didn't. You've got an interesting stance for a truck driver." Jake looked surprised. "How do you know I'm a truck driver?" Victor pointed toward Jake's jacket. The company logo was clearly visible. Truckers usually don't walk like that. Jake smiled. "Old habits." Victor crossed his arms. "Come on. Spar with me." Jake shook his head. "No." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "I'm tired." "You scared?" Jake laughed softly. "No." "Then prove it." Jake looked around the gym. Everyone was watching. He didn't want trouble. He had spent years learning that proving yourself wasn't worth risking unnecessary injury. But Victor kept pushing. "Just one round." Jake sighed. "Fine." The gym became excited. Victor stepped onto the mat. Jake followed. Nobody knew that Jake had once been something very different from a truck driver years earlier. He had served as a Navy SEAL and eventually led an elite special operations team. He had trained under conditions where hesitation could cost lives. But after leaving the military, Jake had promised himself that life would be different. He wanted to be a father. He wanted Ethan to know him as Dad, not as a soldier. Victor raised his fists ready. Jake nodded. "Let's keep it controlled." Victor smirked. "Don't worry. I'll go easy on you." Jake said nothing. The timer started. Victor immediately moved forward. He threw a quick combination. Jake stepped aside effortlessly. The crowd reacted with surprise. Victor attacked again. Jake avoided the strike without throwing a punch. Victor's smile disappeared. He realized something was wrong. Jake wasn't reacting like an ordinary opponent. He was anticipating every movement. Victor increased his speed. Jake remained calm. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to end the situation without anyone getting hurt. And within seconds, everyone in the gym began wondering the same thing. Who exactly was this quiet trucker? Victor attacked again, this time with everything he had. The crowd around the mat grew silent. Jake moved backward, calmly reading every movement. Victor threw a fast kick. Jake stepped aside. Another punch came. Jake blocked it. Victor spun and attempted another strike, but Jake shifted his weight and let the attack pass harmlessly. Nobody understood what they were seeing. Victor was undefeated, yet the quiet trucker wasn't even breathing heavily. "Who taught you to move like that?" Victor demanded. Jake didn't answer. Victor rushed forward again. Jake caught his wrist, redirected his momentum, and gently guided him toward the mat. Victor stopped himself before falling. The gym erupted in whispers. Jake immediately released him. "You're good," Jake said. Victor stared at him. "You barely touched me." "I wasn't trying to hurt you." Victor's pride was clearly wounded. He attacked again. Jake finally moved with greater speed. In one controlled sequence, he avoided Victor's strike, stepped behind him, and secured a position that would have ended the fight instantly. But instead of taking Victor down, Jake released him. Victor turned around, breathing heavily. "Why did you stop?" Jake looked at him. "Because this isn't a battlefield." The words changed the atmosphere. Victor lowered his hands. "What does that mean?" Jake sighed. I served in the military. How long? Long enough. Someone in the crowd noticed a small identification card sticking out of Jake's gym bag. They picked it up and immediately froze. Is this yours? Jake looked over. He nodded. The person read the card aloud. Former United States Navy SEAL. The gym went completely silent. Victor stared at Jake. You were a SEAL? Jake nodded. Years ago. Special operations. Jake didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, I led a small team. Victor's expression changed. He suddenly understood why Jake's movements had looked so different. Jake wasn't showing off. He wasn't trying to prove dominance. He had been trained to remain calm when everything around him became dangerous. Victor slowly lowered his fists. I challenged you because I thought you were just some truck driver. Jake smiled. I am a truck driver. Victor laughed. Right. Jake extended his hand. You're talented. Keep training. Victor shook it. I owe you an apology. You're forgiven. A young man in the crowd asked Jake why he had left the military. Jake looked down for a moment. My son, he explained that after years of serving, he wanted to raise Ethan. I wanted him to know me as his dad. Victor nodded respectfully. That takes strength too. Jake smiled. Different kind. He gathered his things and walked toward the exit. Before leaving, Victor called after him, Jake. Jake turned. Will you ever train here? Jake thought about it. Maybe. Victor smiled. I'd like to learn from you. Jake laughed. Then start by learning when not to fight. Everyone laughed. Later that night, Jake returned home. Ethan ran toward him. Dad, pizza. Jake smiled, of course. As they sat together, Ethan asked about his day. Jake simply said, I met someone who needed to learn a lesson. Ethan laughed. Did you win? Jake looked at his son. That wasn't the point. And that was the truth. Jake had spent years learning how to win battles. But fatherhood had taught him something even more important. Real strength wasn't about proving you could defeat someone. It was knowing you had the power to fight and choosing peace instead.